All right, so my name is Katie Gear, and I will be hosting today along with Deborah Frazier-McMahon. The session is being recorded. If you're tweeting or posting on social media, we welcome you to include @PSMLA1 and hashtag PSMLA21 so we can see and share all of your thoughts. Our presenters' Twitter handles are @ND Campbell and @SRA or Senora Flinchbaugh, if you'd like to tag them as well. For attendance purposes, please be sure that your displayed name matches the name used to register for the conference. If you're unsure how to do so, you can send me a message in the chat and I'd be happy to provide you with some instructions. So please join me in welcoming Nate Campbell and Megan Flinchbaugh to PSMLA.
Good morning, everybody. We're so glad to have you. Thank you for joining us bright and early on a Saturday morning. And we are sad that we can't be with you in person, but hopefully next year, mark your calendars, October 2022, we hope to see you in person. As Katie said, my name is Megan Flinchbaugh and my colleague is Nathan Campbell, and we are both teachers at Manheim Central High School, which is in Lancaster County, Northern Lancaster County. We are the two members of our Spanish department at Manheim Central. It's a pretty small school. And so we collaborate a lot together on our activities, assessments, units, everything. Nate and I have pretty consistently rotated teaching Spanish 3 and AP, and I've always taught Spanish 1 and he's always taught Spanish 2, though he's dipped his feet in the Spanish 1 water more recently the past year. So what we're going to talk to you about today are some different activities related to related to interpersonal communication, authentic interpersonal communication. And our focus is primarily going to be at the novice level. And that is in part because one of the things that we've worked really hard to do over the past couple of years is incorporate opportunities for our engage in speaking activities that go a little bit beyond some of the very basic and contrived activities that we still use sometimes in the classroom and that tend to be pretty prominent in textbook series and things like that. So if you think of a traditional information gap, where you're asking maybe how old people are and the students have different answers and different questions on their papers. Certainly that works, and we use those kinds of activities in our classroom, but we wanted to move a little bit beyond that to engage students in more authentic communication, more true conversation. And so as you can see, we are trying to focus our students on 3 specific concepts or 3 specific ideas, and that is purposeful building of relevant ideas, clarifying and supporting the speaker and the listener, and that there is a true information gap. And so one of the things that we see in something like maybe your more traditional textbook information gap activity is that maybe there's less clarifying and supporting that's needed, or maybe there's not really a building of a relevant and purposeful idea. And so that was something that we wanted to build in. Just kind of back to the basics, how often do we go around asking how old a series of people are? We don't really do that, but we might do the types of activities that you're going to see today. And so that being said, like I said earlier, it's not that Nate and I don't do the traditional information gap activities, because when we introduce certain verbs or certain vocabulary, we want the kids to practice those in meaningful ways as well. But we wanted to then sort of push them a little bit further and engage them a little bit more in some more authentic activities. Those of you that do IPA type of assessments probably build a lot of these types of activities into your classroom already. So when we get to breakout rooms, we hope that you'll be interested and willing to share some of the types of things that you do and that have been successful for you and your students in the classroom. So we have 3 activities to share with you today. They are problem-solving tasks, role-playing tasks, and making plans. Certainly things that we do in our real lives. And the role-playing, obviously, maybe we're not role-playing in real life, but meaning that we engage in different roles in our daily lives. And so all of these things you'll see are things that sort of mimic some of the things that the students are doing in their, or could be doing in their day-to-day. So with that, I'm going to let Nate get started talking about our first activity, which is problem-solving tasks.
All right, thanks. So as Megan mentioned before, one of the goal here is for students to engage in more authentic communications by means of not just standard response conversation. I ask a question, you respond back, but there's more of a thinking and solution based communication. So in problem solving tasks, students are doing exactly what it sounds like. They're going to find a solution to a problem. For this, we come up with some kind of situation that's appropriate to our theme of study. The one we're going to look at in a second is related to our housing unit in Spanish 2. So it's very early, it's our second unit. And students are still really novice mid at best, maybe approaching novice high, but they're still novice communicators. Another example that you could do for that is also choosing like a restaurant. I have students later on in our task when we do our food unit, students have to choose between menus and they have to decide on which restaurant they would want to approach. But I've also done something with Airbnb. Students are going on vacation, they have to select an Airbnb, the best one. But the idea is there's some kind of problem. And so in the preparation side, select your problem. What are they gonna accomplish here? What do they need to solve? What problem? And then I prepare a problem profile. So there's some kind of description. For the one I'm going to show you here, it'll be based on a family, and they have to read about these two families and then choose a house for them. And what resources do I need to provide? Are there any websites that I want to give them? Any limitations? Maybe there's a budgetary information that I want to include, or if they're going to a restaurant, maybe there's health considerations, allergies, things like that. So you can mix it up a little bit and make it more of a challenge. And then how do you want to group them? Are they going to work in pairs? Are they going to, if you're virtual, are they going to do breakout rooms based on small groups? So you have to consider all those things. So the Spanish 2 example I want to give you today, or we want to share with you, is again related to our housing unit. And here students are kind of problem solvers, they're real estate agents. This isn't really role play because they're not going to go and work with the family itself. For this one, this is a 2-part activity. And the students in part 1 first get the information and the instructions, and they have to read about the profiles of these two families. So the examples in Spanish. So just to give you a quick overview of what they have to do. I provide them a website. It's a realty website in Costa Rica, because in this unit, our cultural target culture is really the Caribbean and the Central American region. So we use Costa Rica for this activity because it's different and it allows for variety of housing depending on like where they're at in the country. They receive 2 family profiles. The first family is a younger family. They don't have a lot of money, so they have a restricted budget. But they talk about their future plans and what they would like to do, what kind of a house they would like. And they want to live near a city, so they have access to more stores and things like that. The second family is a large family. The wife has a really good paying job, so money's not really an option. They want a lot of room. They'd rather be in the countryside. So it's a very different type of house that we'd be looking for both. So the assignment here is that all students are getting this profile, and everybody's tasked with first going to this website and deciding on a house. So everybody's picking individually. I'm going to pick what I think is the best house for family 1 and the best house for family 2. And I give students this kind of task. If you're familiar with anything like this, and it doesn't really matter what the activity is, if you give students kind of free reign to go to a website, they can take forever. So it is timed. They get 10 minutes per family to search for a house. And if I gave them 30, they would use all 30. If I gave them 40, they use all 40, because they just keep looking and they get really excited. The website is totally in Spanish. And we talk about the currency because it actually lists the house in colones, but it also lists them in dollars sometimes. So they have to sometimes do the conversion. So that's kind of cool for them to see, because they're always shocked that they're like, wait, 1 colon is worth like 6. I think last time we looked, it was like 625. Or $1 is worth 625 colones. And they're like, wow, that's crazy. So that's a good opportunity for them to talk about money. And then again, so part 2, sorry, this is the website that we use, just a quick snippet of that. The students research the house, they read through the profiles of the house. If they click on each one, they can see all the rooms of the house, but there's a nice description as well. And they have to kind of justify why they think this is the best house. So they're allowed to take notes on this part, and they're going to record their justification on paper, wherever they want, or on using Google Doc, doesn't matter. Part 2, they're going to be paired up. And for this part, I actually have my students record. This year I had them record. Last year, because we were on, I think when we did this activity, we happened to be online and virtual at the time. So I put them in breakout rooms, and Megan and I learned how to allow students to record their own breakout room sessions. I recognize that some people will have restrictions in their school district on that, but you can also drop in and listen to the conversations or have other ways for them to report back for accountability. But for us, I had them record them. And this year they did it in person, so they used their cell phones to record and then they upload. But this is timed as well. They have 8 minutes, and the task is for them to talk about the 2 houses. So they're first going to say, all right, here's the house that I found for family 1. What did you find? I found this one. They go back and forth and they show, and then their task is to pick one final house between the 2 and justify why they think this one is the best one. And it was really fun this year to listen to their conversations, because they're not allowed to write anything down. They're not allowed to prepare for it. They have to start recording right from the beginning of when they sit down together. And they have their notes that they can refer back to, but you'll hear kids be like, no, and again, this is mid-level, so their Spanish isn't quite that high, but I give them starter phrases like, I think that, or I think that this is, or I believe that. And they'll use those starter phrases and they'll go through and explain why. And they'll say, well, mine has a bigger pool, or mine has room for a dog. And then they upload that. So this is one example. All right, the next activity that we do is a role-playing activity. This is also for Spanish 2. And this activity is one that I really love. I don't know why. I think I've been doing it for a very long time. The students really enjoy it. These types of activities, students take on the role and they pretend to be the person within the reality of situation that it is. So in this one, students are, you'll have to develop this. This can be more developed, this needs to be more prepared by the teacher in advance, because you're going to have to design the role. You might have products. Before we start this activity, before we ever arrive to this activity, students will have done a lot of vocabulary research or learning. They will have learned a lot about the target products and practices before they actually enter into the task. So for this task, we do a market, and this is this is later on in our Spanish 2. So this is more of a novice, mid to high level. And we turn our classroom into an open air market. They will have already studied and read about, we specifically do Otavalo in Ecuador. So they will already learned about some of the products that they would find in the Otavalo market. They will learn some of the phrases and some of the ways to respond. And then they get assigned a role. And the 2 roles are seller and buyer. And you have more buyers than sellers. And each student gets kind of an activity sheet that kind of helps them understand what they have to do. And so this is an example of the seller. The sellers get a little store, and they have little cards that have the products. So this one is an example of some of the things made from handicraft type things I'm having trouble with tejidos, textile type things that could be produced. So that you can see there's garments that they could wear, mask, things like that. Anyway, but the students have a name of a store. They set up their area in the classroom. Usually if I have 20 people in the room, I might have 6 vendors, and then I'll have the rest be buyers. I give a suggested price list for the vendors. As you can see down here, the ceramics, they would sell them for 5, and you're going to notice it's in euros, and you're going to be like, why are we using euros if this is in Ecuador? Okay, so the quick reason why we do euros instead of dollars is because Ecuador uses the American dollar, and we do have a conversation about that, but that's not really exciting to the kids to have. And a long time ago, I got euros that I could use, so we use euros for it, and we have a whole conversation about euros too. So that's a little parentheses there. Anyway, so they have a suggested price list that they have to sell them for. And then the buyers, They're given a stack of euros. Everybody receives, I think, like 280 euros I give them randomly. And they have the task of buying products or gifts for different people that they want to buy for. So if you look down here, this is the client one. It says they have to buy something for their father, something for their mother, something for their grandparents, something for a friend, and maybe something for themselves as well. And it gives kind of a suggested gift. So that way they have to visit all the stores. And so they go around the room. And my goal is always to have 2 of each type of store if I can. It always depends on class size. But if I can, that way there's a little bit more competition, and they can, the vendors can kind of argue with themselves. This is, of course, timed as well. And during this time, your room is a little chaotic while the market is open. I give them about 15 minutes to make their sales, go around and make all their purchases, and negotiate. I leave the screen here on the whiteboard so that they can refer back to it, because I want to, again, encourage the use of the target language. Most of them are pretty good at using this to begin with. They don't have to look because we've studied it quite a bit already and read about it in context and things like that. But you'll see kids look up and reference it still, which is fine. And that's what we want them to do. So while the market is open, I walk around, I have my clipboard and I'm paying attention, watching, and you'll hear everybody negotiate. Some people are very stingy with their money. It's always very telling personality wise what people are like, but it's a great opportunity. The kids absolutely love this type of activity. At the end of the activity, they go back down to their seats and then they review about what were they able to accomplish. Were they able to buy everything that they needed? And for the sellers, how much money did they make? Were they able to sell all their products? Did they hit their quota for the day? Things like that. So that's how we usually close out. And usually this takes quite a bit of time. This whole thing takes about 35 to 45 minutes, depending on the class and how many vendors and sellers there are. But at the end, it's always fun. The kids always like to see who had the most money or who bought most of the products. So that is how we do the role playing there.
Okay, great. I'm glad that Nate made that comment about how time consuming it can be, because it is true that sometimes between the preparation that the students need to do for some of these activities and then the execution of the activities themselves, and then depending on the nature of the activity, we may want to review it with them as a whole group or something like that. Sometimes it really can take a long time. And I don't remember if either of us mentioned that we do teach on a block schedule. So sometimes, we can fit these activities into a single block. But if we were on a more traditional schedule, as we used to be in another school, we might spread these activities out over several days. I know sometimes that's a question that comes up is, how long are you giving the kids to do these things? And I know, like Nate said, giving them a time limit is a good idea, because they're very good at using up all of their time, no matter how much you give them. So good to kind of give them a little bit of a limit and go from there. So yeah, those are 2 activities that Nate does very successfully in Spanish 2. And this is an activity we wanted to give them some opportunities to work in that same sort of atmosphere of more authentic style communication, beginning in level 1, because what we were finding is that while our students were very proud of what they accomplish in 1 semester of Spanish, they get really far. We like to remind them at the end of the year that when they came in and we were saying things like, hola, ¿cómo estás? Hi, how are you? And what's your name? It was very overwhelming for them. And now by the end of the year, they're conversational and they understand what's happening in class all block long. And they really do make tremendous progress. But still, so much of what we used to do with them was a little bit, I don't want to say rote, because it wasn't that. It did require thought. It did require meaning. They did have to understand what they were doing, but it wasn't quite as meaningful. And so we wanted to incorporate that a little bit more into our level 1 class. So one of the activities that we have started doing, and to be perfectly honest, we're still tweaking it. Probably just like all of you, no matter how wonderful your lessons might go over, you find new ways to make them better. And so we're still working on that with this particular assignment that we give our students. And we do believe that we're getting closer and closer to the best version of it that we can find. So this activity, the students are making plans together. And by this time in Spanish 1, the students have had present tense conjugation. They've had a little bit about obligation, talking about things they have to do. They've gotten a pretty good amount of vocabulary between school and family and city vocabulary and activities and things like that. And they've studied a couple different cultural themes throughout their studies so far. And so when they get here, they're maybe almost to the end of Spanish 1, just not quite. It's not like our last unit, but it's pretty close to that. So when they're doing this activity, we expect that they're able to converse a little bit more naturally. They're still novice students, and they still need a lot of support, but we hope that they can participate a little bit more fluently and naturally without needing quite as many sentence starters and quite as much support as we might have to give them if it were earlier in the semester. So as you can see there, we need to create a task for them. And because this is about making plans, the activity that we have our students do, this is the culminating activity of our cities unit. And in our cities unit, we chose the city Madrid. We could have chosen any city, but it's the first time students are looking at Spain in Spanish 1. And so we chose Madrid. And you could choose any destination, but Madrid is our focus because that's also our cultural focus for the unit. And you could choose activities, but again, we chose a destination because it fit with the themes of our unit. And again, we chose Madrid, which was related to our target culture in our case. So what we have the students do after having some exposure to Madrid. So we expose the kids to the culture of Madrid through transportation. And it sounds kind of silly perhaps, but transportation looks different in different countries. And it's good for kids to be thinking about how people get around. It was a shock to me personally when I got to Spain my first time and everybody was walking everywhere. That was a cultural shock for me. And so that's something that we share with them. We look at how the taxis are white, different things like that, and different ways that people get around the city. So they've seen a little bit about Madrid. They do a little bit of reading about some of the cultural and tourist attractions in Madrid. And so they've got a little bit of background before they get to this point. So in addition to the vocabulary and the grammar that they've acquired through the unit, now they also have the cultural background. So when they get their assignment, we give them the assignment of investigating activities. So this could be based on the reading that they've done. This could be other activities and locations to visit, like I said, tourist attractions that might be interesting to them. So first, they sort of plan their own ideal vacation. If they were going to take a trip to Spain, a trip to Madrid, what would they do? How would they get there? What would they want to see? What would they want to do? How would they get around the city? What would be their priorities? And so we ask them to choose 4 different locations to visit, and they talk then about how would they get there, what would they do there, and in this we have them focus on like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm planning this trip, and this is what I'm going to do, because we have them working on the implied future using the to be going to do something for. And so we have them sort of prepare all of that. And the way you can see in the slide there that the way we have them prepare their materials is not to write it all out. We have them essentially create a visual aid for themselves where they would put in the name of the place that they want to go to, pictures of that place, and then maybe a few key vocabulary words that they would use if they were going to talk about that place. And that is in preparation then for the interpersonal activity that they will do with a partner. And as Nate mentioned about one of the other activities with this, last year we had a lot of success having them work together via Zoom and then record the pair conversations via Zoom. And he and I actually had Spanish 1 at the same time, just across the hall from each other. So we paired our kids in, like one kid from my class was paired with somebody from his class. And it just made it a little bit more difficult because they couldn't like glance across the room at each other and, make faces or something. Even though they were on camera, it just felt like it was a little bit more, there was a little more pressure on, and we actually liked that because kids get really comfortable comfortable working with the same people all the time. So this was nice. Once they have their plans made for themselves, and like I said, in that previous slide, you could see that there were pictures and a little bit of vocabulary to support all the information that they were going to talk about, how they're going to get to Madrid, what they're going to do, how they're going to get around, etc. Then we paired them up. And as you can see now in this slide, we provided some guided support to them in English. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the work by Eileen Glisson and Richard Donato, who have written some recent books on the high leverage teaching practices that you can get them through ACTFL's website. And they are excellent resources. And those two are like the superstars of world language education and professional development. So look them up if you haven't. But Nate and I are very inspired by them. And one of the things that they really support is target language use in the classroom. 90%, sometimes 100% if you can get that far. But one of the ways that they use English and that they encourage the use of English in their classrooms is through providing support for interpersonal communication tasks. And that is so that you're providing the structure for the students without providing the language to the students. So if you provide everything in Spanish, for example, in our case, then students may rely heavily on that. And that is okay, except that then you don't know if they know. Right. So like if they're just reading the things off of the sheet that you give them, the questions they're supposed to ask their partner, you don't know if they know how to ask those questions. You don't know if they know how to formulate those ideas on their own because they're just reading what they have on the paper. And even the students who are responding, how many times have you heard a student, you ask the student, what's your name? And the student responds, what's your name, Nate? And instead of saying my name is Nate, right? Well, sometimes students do the same thing and it gives us the false impression that they understand or that they have some idea when really they really don't. And so providing English in this way helps us know as teachers that the students know. Okay, so with that in mind, we provide this English support, and some of this that you'll see, this support that we provide is simply the purpose of having this conversation. What do we want the kids to do here? We try to really drill into them from the beginning of the year that it's not about perfection. It's about communication and making yourself understood and understanding what you're hearing. It is not about having the perfect sentence. And so that even if you're not totally sure what to say something. But also we want it to be conversational. And so we gave them a couple of pieces of advice here for how to make it conversational. As you can see then, one of the other things that we provided is a list of some useful expressions that we don't expect the kids to have memorized. So it's okay for us if they don't know and memorize this particular vocabulary all the time. If they don't know how to say, I don't understand, or again, or something like that, we're okay with that. So we provided that for them, and also even just question words, just because we felt like, that those are useful tools, and we don't want kids to get tripped up because they said donde instead of cuando or something like that. But you can also see that we didn't provide the English for those because those are more refresher words than they are brand new or unfamiliar. And again, just a few more tips in English, and we allow the students to have this with them during their conversation. So then during the conversation, like I said, we asked the students to record via Zoom, and then once their recording was done, they uploaded it to Schoology. And the idea during the activity, during the assessment, we put a timer on and crossed our fingers and hoped for the best. And honestly, the first time we found that the students were a little bit too rigid in their conversation. And so that was actually what prompted us to provide that support in English and say, like, this is what we're looking for when you do this conversation. So that the next time the kids did it, it was a little bit more conversational. And we heard kids saying, like, I am going to go to Madrid by plane. Are you going to go to Madrid by plane? Like, obviously the answer was yes for all of those students, but then they would have had perhaps 4 totally different activities that they had chosen. And so then they had to come to an agreement in the end about which activities they were going to do, and together choose only 4. And then together kind of talk about what their final decisions were going to be. And we made clear to them, it's not about the final decision. Let's say together you only agree on one place. That's okay. The whole point is to have the conversation. And so that's what we evaluated, was the conversation, not the final decisions. And you can see a version of a rubric there. Something that's not included there that we do also include in a lot of these when we make them assessments, because in this case, this one was actually an assessment. When we make these assessments is also a cultural piece. Like, are they incorporating cultural elements? Are they comparing or contrasting, or are they recognizing different perspectives, or even like different products and things? Are they at least able to identify some of those things? And is that obvious through the conversation that they're having? So that kind of gives you an idea of 3 of the things that we've tried to incorporate at our more novice or very low intermediate levels. Again, like, they're just 3 ideas, and hopefully they can spark some inspiration for you, or you'll see maybe how they're connected to some things that you already do. Nate, did you want to say anything else before we?
No, I was just gonna, like, as Megan stated already, not all of the things that we do are assessed as like final assessments like this. This one was a culminating activity for that. The role-playing activity, for example, I don't actually assess that at all. It's just a good opportunity for them to practice. But what it does do is set up for me later on in my unit, when we get to the end of Spanish 2, they have to do a mock conversation. Again, it's similar in style to some of these. They actually do another making plans for their final exam in Spanish 2. But as preparation for that, they do another marketplace type activity as practice. And we style those activities off of the AP exam. If you're familiar with the oral proficiency interview process, or the mock OPI that they do on the AP test, there's a speaker who's going to say something and you have to respond. So the students are tasked with in advance doing some research ahead of time on a destination, and they each have a different one. So one might be just destined to go to Costa Rica, one Spain, one Peru, one Argentina. They're all different. They're all based on our units of study for the course. And they have to pick a destination to go to and have that negotiation of plans. It's very similar to what they did in Spanish 1 at the end, which Megan just went over, but it's structured more like the AP style. So we didn't want to include that in here, and I kind of went over it anyway, but if you're interested in that, you can always email me later. What we want to do now, though, is give you guys an opportunity in breakout rooms. In a second here, our host is going to post the breakout rooms, and they are organized that you can select them yourself. If you have trouble selecting them, then you just let the host know in the chat, and she will allow you to, Katie will put you in the one that you would like to be in. Some people sometimes have trouble depending on your Zoom, which version of Zoom you have. You can't select, but it'll be based on language. And what we'd like to do is give you time to talk about the activities we saw here, or talk about how you can support students without scripting their conversations. The idea here is not that they write down everything and then they just read it to each other. It's not that you can't ever do that, but that's not authentic communication. We want students to have that opportunity to have negotiation of meeting, have to listen, and have to respond back based on what the feedback was. Referring to the 3 types of activities, you can talk about those. You're not gonna be able to hit on all these questions. And Megan already shared it.
Yes, I'll just jump in here to say the Google Doc that's there, the first page includes a screenshot of these questions so that you in your breakout rooms can see them. But also then, if you so choose, on the subsequent pages, there is there's a table for each language, where if you have resources that you use and you have a link to them or a description of them that you'd be willing to share, we all now have access to this document, and you can make a copy of it at the end of this session, and hopefully refer back to some of those things to incorporate if you like. So that's just kind of like a working document if you'd like to go ahead and use that.
All right, thanks, Megan. So I don't want to take all your time, so you can read the questions in your groups and decide what you'd like to talk about. So they are open now, and you can jump in. Again, if you're not able to select a room, just throw it in the chat and we will move you into the room.
If anybody's in this main room now and you're trying to get into a breakout room, you'd like to participate in a breakout room, please, you can unmute yourself and let us know, or send Katie or either of us a chat, and we can try to work that out for you. We hope everybody had a productive conversation and that you were able to share some different ideas and some maybe even some different resources. And we would like to thank you for sharing some of your free time with us this Saturday morning. As Katie said earlier, you can contact us if you have any questions or if there's anything that you need. Those are our email addresses, our Instagram handles. That's also my Twitter handle. Nate's is a little different. So it's the one that Katie shared at the beginning, which is ND Campbell. So you can reach out to us that way, but email is probably the best if it's for questions and things like that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Katie.
Right. Thanks, guys. And on behalf of PSMLE, we want to thank everyone for attending this session with Nathan Campbell and Megan Flinchbaugh. We absolutely welcome and encourage your feedback on our session. So please use the link in the PDF program or found in the chat to give this session some feedback. The recording of the session will be available to conference registrants after the event up and through February. So as a reminder for our teachers in Pennsylvania, in order to qualify this session for Act 48 credit, you must complete the Act 48 reflection form. You can find that Act 48 form linked in the PDF program or in the chat. And these forms should be completed within 72 hours of the session. So thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of our virtual conference.